Over the last few years, conversations about mental health have become impossible to avoid. People talk about anxiety more openly than ever before. Depression is discussed in schools, workplaces, podcasts, and social media feeds. Therapy has become mainstream. Mental health awareness campaigns are everywhere. More books, more advice, more experts, and more resources. And yet something doesn't add up. If awareness is increasing, why do so many people still feel mentally exhausted? Why do so many people wake up feeling overwhelmed before the day has even started? Why are so many people constantly tired, distracted, anxious, lonely, emotionally numb, or unsure about where their life is headed? Because what if the problem is bigger than stress? What if mental health is not declining because people are becoming weaker? What if it is declining because modern life is placing pressures on the human mind that previous generations never had to experience at this scale? Most discussions about mental health focus on symptoms: anxiety, depression, burnout, and stress. But symptoms are often the result of something deeper. The real question is this: what invisible forces are shaping the way people think, feel, and experience life every single day? Because mental health does not exist in isolation. It is influenced by the way we work, the way we measure success, the expectations we place on ourselves, and the expectations society places on us. In this investigation, we're not going to focus on diagnoses. We're not going to focus on self-help advice. Instead, we're going to examine some of the hidden pressures that have quietly become normal parts of modern life. Pressures that many people experience every day without realizing how much they affect their minds. Because before you can understand why mental health is declining, you first have to understand the environment people are trying to stay mentally healthy inside. And once you start looking closely at that environment, the picture becomes far more complicated than most people realize. Welcome to the glitch cult, where we look beyond the surface, question what everyone accepts, and uncover the hidden realities shaping the human experience. One of the least discussed reasons why mental health is deteriorating is that many people no longer feel allowed to simply exist. That might sound strange at first. After all, nobody walks around telling people they need to earn the right to exist. Yet modern life constantly sends a different message. From a very early age, people are taught to attach their value to what they produce, achieve, accomplish, or contribute. As children, approval often comes through performance. Good grades receive praise. Achievements receive recognition. Success receives attention. Over time, many people begin to absorb an idea that follows them into adulthood. Your value is connected to your usefulness. The problem is that usefulness is never a stable target. There is always another goal, another milestone, another achievement, another expectation to fulfill. As a result, many people spend their entire lives feeling as though they are constantly being evaluated, not by a single person, but by society itself. People begin measuring themselves through invisible scoreboards: how much money they make, how attractive they are, how successful they are, how far ahead they are compared to others. The result is that life slowly transforms from something that is lived into something that is continuously assessed. Instead of asking whether they are content, many people find themselves asking whether they are doing enough. Instead of asking whether they are healthy, they ask whether they are falling behind. Instead of asking whether they are fulfilled, they ask whether they are successful. And these questions never really end, because modern culture provides very few finish lines. The moment one goal is achieved, another appears. The moment one problem is solved, another expectation takes its place. The moment one milestone is reached, a new comparison begins. Many people therefore live in a permanent state of psychological evaluation. Even during moments that should feel peaceful, a day off becomes an opportunity to catch up. Rest becomes something that must be earned. Doing nothing begins to create guilt. Not because resting is harmful, but because many people have been conditioned to associate worth with productivity for so long that inactivity starts to feel like failure. This creates a constant background pressure on the mind, a pressure that is rarely dramatic enough to attract attention, but persistent enough to slowly wear people down. The human brain was never designed to spend every day measuring its value against endless standards. Yet that is exactly what many people go through. They carry an invisible burden that follows them everywhere. A feeling that they should be doing more, becoming more, achieving more, and improving more, even when they're already exhausted. What makes this pressure particularly dangerous is that it often disguises itself as ambition. People believe they're simply being driven, motivated, and disciplined, and sometimes they are. But there's a difference between pursuing a goal because you genuinely want it and pursuing a goal because you are afraid of what it means if you stop. Many people are not running towards something. They are running away from a feeling that if they're not progressing, they're losing value, a feeling that if they're not achieving, they are falling behind, a feeling that if they're not useful, they somehow matter less. The psychological consequences of carrying that belief for years can be enormous. Chronic anxiety, burnout, emotional exhaustion, and a persistent feeling of inadequacy. A constant sense that no achievement is ever enough. And perhaps most importantly, a gradual inability to separate who you are from what you accomplish. When that happens, every setback becomes personal. Every failure becomes an attack on identity. Every period of uncertainty becomes a threat to self-worth. And the mind never truly gets a chance to rest, because it is always trying to answer the same exhausting question. Have I done enough to deserve my place in the world? For many people, that question is operating quietly in the background of their mind every single day, and they don't even realize it. Yet it may be one of the most significant psychological pressure that's shaping the modern mental health today. One of the most overlooked contributors to declining mental health is that many people no longer feel like they are ever complete. For much of life, people are chasing a future version of themselves, a future where they're more successful, more confident, more attractive, more financially secure, more accomplished, more knowledgeable, and more fulfilled. The assumption is simple. Once those things are achieved, peace will finally arrive. The stress will decrease. The uncertainty will disappear. Life will begin to feel complete. But for many people, that moment never comes, because modern life continuously moves the finish line. Every achievement quickly becomes normal. Every success becomes expected. Every improvement becomes the new baseline. A promotion that once felt exciting eventually becomes routine. A financial goal that once seemed life-changing eventually feels insufficient. A personal milestone that once represented years of effort quickly loses its emotional impact. The human mind adapts remarkably fast. What once felt extraordinary eventually feels ordinary. As a result, many people spend years pursuing destinations that provide only temporary satisfaction. Then they find themselves asking a difficult question. Why do I feel strangely empty inside? This question can be surprisingly destabilizing, because people often build entire identities around future achievements. They convince themselves that happiness exists on the other side of goal, That confidence exists on the other side of success. That fulfillment exists on the other side of accomplishment. But when those accomplishments are finally achieved and still life feels incomplete, many begin questioning themselves. They wonder whether they chose the wrong goal, the wrong career, or the wrong version of success. This creates a psychological cycle that can continue indefinitely. Instead of examining the system itself, people simply choose another target, another objective, another milestone, another version of the future that promises relief. And the cycle begins again. At the same time, people are living in an environment that constantly exposes them to the achievements of others. At almost any moment, there appears to be someone making more money, reaching bigger milestones, experiencing more of the world, and living a life that seems more exciting than your own. The result is that comparison becomes nearly impossible to avoid. Historically, people compared themselves primarily to those around them. Today, people compare themselves to thousands of individuals across the world, many of whom are displaying only the most successful moments of their lives. The mind was never designed for this level of continuous comparison, yet it has become normal. A person can make significant progress and still feel inadequate because someone else appears to be further ahead. A person can achieve a goal they once dreamed about and immediately begin focusing on someone who has achieved more. The consequence is subtle but powerful. People lose the ability to recognize progress. They become experts at identifying what is missing, and over time, this habit begins affecting how they view themselves. Achievements feel smaller. Success feels temporary. Progress feels insufficient. Life begins to feel like an endless series of unfinished tasks. This creates another psychological burden. The feeling that there is always something else that should be happening. Something else that should be fixed. Something else that should be improved. Something else that should be accomplished. Even during moments of rest. Even during moments of success. Even during moments that should feel meaningful. The mind remains focused on what comes next. What is often called ambition can sometimes become a permanent state of dissatisfaction. Not because ambition is unhealthy, but because the mind becomes incapable of appreciating where it currently stands. The future slowly consumes the present, and this has consequences for mental health. When people rarely experience a sense of completion, they rarely experience psychological relief. Stress becomes chronic rather than temporary. Pressure becomes constant rather than situational. Self-worth becomes dependent on future outcomes rather than present realities. Eventually, many people begin living in a state of perpetual incompleteness. Not because they are failing, not because they lack discipline, not because they are doing something wrong, but because they have absorbed a belief that they must constantly become something else before they are allowed to feel satisfied. And perhaps that is one of the most exhausting psychological pressures of modern life. The belief that who you are right now is always a work in progress, always unfinished. When enough people begin carrying that belief, declining mental health should not surprise us, because the human mind needs moments of stability, moments where the race finally stops. Without those moments, life can begin to feel less like an experience and more like an endless pursuit of a destination that never fully appears. And that silent pursuit may be affecting far more people than they realize.